Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. In this video we're going to be covering some of the storylines that have come out since the Hungarian Grand Prix. We're going to talk about those heroic mechanics at Red Bull. We're going to be talking about Williams' race pace or lack of it. The story that's still bubbling away about Sebastian Vettel potentially joining Racing Point. And of course, while we're on the subject of Racing Point, we're going to talk about that Renault protest which happened again after Hungary. And we'll rumble on for some time to come, I think. First of all, I've got to say apologies for going AWOL this week. I did have a live show, as always, set up on Monday, but I've not been at home this week. I was staying at a friend's house looking after it down on the south coast, and their internet connection just wasn't stable enough to make that work, so I couldn't do that on Monday, so apologies. And then after that, well, let's be honest, I've just been having too much fun at the beach with my my kids and dogs and family, and therefore making videos got bumped some way down the list. However, we are now back, and so hopefully, as best I can, normal service will be resumed starting today. Because there were so many questions ahead of Monday's show, I thought we'd pick through some of the most popular ones that lots of people asked and try and expand on those. We'll start with that, the heroics of those Red Bull racing mechanics on the grid on Sunday, because lots of people have said, how on earth did they get Max's car ready in such a short space of time? Have you ever been in those situations? Lots of people asked, what does it feel like? Who takes the lead? What are the protocols that kick in? Well, actually, when those situations occur, and they are rare, let's be honest, there are a set of protocols that kick in. People said to me, how do so many people work on top of each other in such a confined space? Who makes the call? Who decides what's going to happen? And these are those situations that actually, although it's your kind of worst nightmare, when you see your driver crashing off into the wall on the formation lap, it's also the moments you live for as a mechanic, because what went on to unfold on Sunday was just a brilliant set of circumstances that they managed to achieve the impossible in getting the car ready. And then Max went on, of course, to deliver probably the best payback he could have delivered, given the circumstances, getting that incredible second place. So what happens is the car comes back to the grid slot. It's the mechanics who take the lead on this, of course, because team management have to defer to the experience of the mechanics. So the number one mechanic, in conjunction with the front end guy, who will have been the one covering that area of the car, will very quickly make an assessment, find out exactly what's damaged. They'll be on the radio calling back to the garage to get people to immediately find spares of those components, get them sent over to the pit wall. The number one mechanic, or more likely the chief mechanic, will be in conversation with the FIA or the technical delegate, Joe Bauer, saying, listen, this is what's happened. We need to make some changes. They're going to be like-for-like changes. We're not changing the setup. We're not changing the components. But obviously we've got crash damage. And crash damage is allowed to be changed under Parc Fermé rules, as long as it's supervised by the FIA. And then the front-end mechanic will be the guy that kind of leads the situation, because it's his zone, it's his area of the car. He knows it better than anybody, and he will be like the conductor, coordinating what everyone else is doing. Everyone else is there to assist him, essentially, and he will dish out jobs or roles to individual people who will then get on with them in the most efficient way possible, trying their best to stay out of each other's way. It's just it's a chaotic situation, but you know, these are what these guys live for. They are unbelievable moments, and when you pull it off like that, and I have been in situations like this, if you've read my book, there's a great one in there that I might actually do a Tales from the Treehouse on one day, where you know, these moments are almost seemingly impossible. And I watched that on the race, on the build up to the race on Sunday, and thought, oh my god, that's it, you know, Max is out, he's not going to start this race. Turns out it was a track rod and I think a push rod that needed replacing. The wishbones unbelievably were okay, and they managed to do that. But these are jobs that you would normally take so much time and care and attention. You'd put the car back onto the flat patch, set it up, make sure everything is millimetre or fractions of a millimetre perfect. They didn't have time to do all that. They had to throw the pieces on. They would have taken measurements off the old, things like the old track rod, and then put the new one back together with their best guess of getting it as close to the setup that it was before. No time to measure it, no time to check it. Send the car out, and as Max said, it felt like new. Absolute heroics. Well done to everybody. Total respect. But this is why these guys on the grid and in the teams in Formula One are the very best in the world. Well, quite a busy day today. We extended our trip down on the south coast by an extra day, which means there was one less day back at home before I then fly to Slovenia on Saturday for another trip, filming some stuff for BMW. That means I then go into another period of 14 days of quarantine when I get back, which I could definitely do without. And that also means that everything that I had to do in 3 days has now got to be crammed into 2, including doing some shopping for my trip to go to Slovenia. I've got to buy a new drone, because as you remember, I landed my last one in the river and the prognosis doesn't look great. I've got kids at home with having broken up from school. My wife's working. I've got all sorts on today, plus trying to get this video finished and maybe something else for tomorrow. Also got to film my Silverstone preview video because I won't be able to do it ahead of the race next week. So loads going on. But let's quickly talk about the Renault protest of the Racing Point, which went in again off the back of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Exactly the same protest, protesting the front and rear brake ducts. It's essentially exactly the same as what happened the week before in the Styrian Grand Prix. The reason for that is that, look, if Renault believed those brake ducts were illegal 1 week earlier, although they are racing under protest, Racing Point fully admit they are the same brake ducts that they raced in Hungary. Renault have to then protest it again. And the reason for that is, first of all, to solidify their belief that they are illegal ducts or they are illegal components, but also if the protest falls on the side of Renault, Racing Point would be excluded, of course, from the Styrian Grand Prix. But now, having protested them again, they would also be excluded from the Hungarian Grand Prix. And of course, Renault and others could all stand to benefit from that by being bumped up the order and gaining the points that come along with that. So that's the reason that it's happened. There's no difference. They've not compounded any further components because everybody accepts, the FIA and even Racing Point, that this is identical. The car was identical in terms of those components. The protest is identical. So let's just carry on regardless. We'll base everything off the protest at the Styrian Grand Prix, and whatever result that gets, it will be replicated at the Hungarian Grand Prix. We expect there may well be some kind of judgment before Silverstone, but that's not guaranteed. And if we don't get one, expect exactly the same thing to happen on Sunday night after the British Grand Prix too. Whilst we're on the subject of Racing Point, let's talk about Sebastian Vettel. It's looking increasingly likely, or at least it's looking increasingly plausible, that Sebastian Vettel could end up at Racing Point next year. Sergio Perez has openly acknowledged that those talks are going on, so has Sebastian Vettel. Perez has also openly acknowledged that if Vettel is to arrive at Racing Point, he knows, as I think we all do, which of their 2 current drivers would have to make space, given that Lance's dad essentially owns the team with his consortium of investors. I think it's a really sad situation, if I'm really honest, and I don't want to slant Lance Stroll. I actually think Lance is a decent driver. I don't think he's one of these kids with a rich dad who's in Formula One without any, without deserving a place, without any kind of credibility or without any talent behind his name. I don't think that's the case. I definitely think he can hold his own in a racing car, and now that he's got a decent car underneath him, I think we've even seen glimpses of that with Lance holding his own against Sergio at times. So let's not write Lance off in this same storyline, but I do also think that if you're going to line those 2 drivers up, you still got to say Sergio Perez is a better bet for an Aston Martin coming into the sport, trying to do great things. He's full of experience, he's full of talent, he knows that team inside out, he's worked with them for years, the team know him as well. And that really, when you're looking to build a new brand like Aston Martin, is exactly what you want. Yes, Vettel has experience in the sport. He doesn't have experience with that power unit, with that set of engineers, with this particular car, with this team's way of working, which is, let's face it, slightly unique when you compare it to the likes of Red Bull or Ferrari, given that they're doing everything on such a tight budget. So there's a really great argument to say that a Sebastian Vettel alongside a Sergio Perez would absolutely be the optimum lineup for next year. And if you're Aston Martin, or if you're the investors behind Aston Martin, surely you then have to have some kind of say as to, who you've got in your car. If you're a group of investors in this sport, you've got a right to want the very best for your brand, and that means having the best 2 drivers available in your car Is that Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel, or is that Sergio Perez and Sebastian Vettel? It's an interesting one. I'd love to see the conversations going on in the boardroom behind the scenes between Lawrence and his co-investors, but I think, sadly or otherwise, whichever way you look at it, it's looking increasingly likely that it will be Sergio Perez that makes way for the four-time world champion Sebastian Vettel to come into his place, if indeed they can agree terms. And on that subject, I'd love to know your thoughts actually, because is the public perception of what will be Aston Martin, you know, equally as important as bringing in somebody like Sebastian or hanging on to one of the, the chairman's son? Is the public perception of loyalty, of looking after, this driver, particularly in Perez, who's given so much to this team, who even helped the team to survive when they came out of their Force India days, would there be a public backlash? I mean, there's already been something of a public backlash with the rumours floating around, but if they were to offload Perez, keep Lance Stroll to bring in Sebastian Vettel, would there be a swing of opinion from a team that's universally liked in general amongst Formula One fans in Force India, the sort of perennial overachievers, the guys that are operating on a shoestring, that are taking the fight to the big boys? People love that team. They've always loved that team, even since it was Jordan. Could the public swing against them if they become Aston Martin and get rid of Perez to bring in Vettel whilst keeping on board Lance Stroll? Let me know. I'd love to know what you think on that.